Welcome to the Daily MBA, where business wisdom is served fresh and fast, straight from one of the top MBA programs in the world. I'll give you summaries of my lectures and readings, as well as the most important insights gained from an MBA, so you can apply all of this knowledge in every business. Let's get started. I'm Maria Gomez, and today I have the honor to interview Rob, CEO and founder of Float. Float is an all-in-one card and spend management solution that helps Canadian businesses control their spending. They offer corporate cards, fast bill payments, reimbursement, and expense management software, all of this aiming to provide businesses with complete control over their finances. Recently, Float secured a $70 million Series B financing round led by growth equity at Goldman Sachs Alternatives, with participation from OME or S Ventures, FJ Labs, Terralis, and existing investors of Garage Capital. This investment brings Float's total funding over the past year to more than $120 million, including a $50 million credit facility announced in February 2024. So first of all, congratulations, Rob, and we're very excited to have you join us.
Thanks for having me.
So before we start, I want to go back a couple of years to understand what led you up to being the founder of Float. And I know that before founding this company, you played a significant role in launching Uber in many different countries in Europe. So I want you to walk us through how this international growth strategy was and which key lessons you learned about growth while you were at Uber.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So for quick background, I grew up in Toronto. I've been dreaming always from a very young age of building a business. I've always dreamed of entrepreneurship from a very young age and been fascinated in, technology and how you can build businesses with technology. It was always something I was passionate about. But I started my career in private equity investing. I spent 5 years doing that in Toronto. And in 2014, I had this sort of epiphany where I think a lot of people that work in professional services after a couple of years say, what's my purpose? What am I creating other than financial models and decks and memos for other people's businesses? And I felt a lack of ownership and I felt a lack of opportunity to really impact something that is used by people day to day. And so I left in search of a startup opportunity. And I ended up joining Uber. And Uber at the time was already a rapidly growing company. It was about 700 or 800 people. And they had a really interesting job called the international launcher. And this was a really interesting, rare role. Now it's more common, but back then it was quite rare. And the job posting was really simple. It was, as a launcher at Uber, you're going to be moving around all over the world. You're going to move every 2 months, and you're going to launch Uber in a new market. And your job is going to be to get the business up and running, recruit the team, train them on how to do the 3 core jobs that exist in every new Uber city, and then move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. And so that led me into joining Uber in May of 2014. I got sent shortly after joining to Eastern Europe, and I was just told to go to Eastern Europe and start launching markets, Prague, Budapest, Bucharest, Sofia, Bulgaria. These are all next. So get going. And I was like, well, I don't know how to do this. But over the course of the next 18 months, I launched many cities and countries, and the region over the course of the next 2 to 3 years grew to be very significant. It went from, myself in a Starbucks and, 1 or 2 drivers on the Uber platform in Prague in August of 2014 to when I came back to Canada in 2017, our Eastern European business was live in 10 countries, 40 cities. We were doing over 2.5 million trips a week and serving, hundreds of thousands of people. And I look back at that journey and, there's a couple of things that jump out to me. One is a relentless focus on execution. I think that one of the hardest things for people that come from a professional services background or have done an MBA and have worked in big companies is how useless your skills are for the first 2 years of a startup. There is simply zero value in doing much in the way of strategic research. It's just simply not valuable. The things that move the needle when you're building a business are finding your first 10 customers and then finding the next 20 and then finding the next 30 and literally executing thousands of little things that you need to do to get going. And so as a launcher, I had to juggle about 140 to 150 tasks or outcomes that had to be completed before launch. And there was just simply not enough time in the day to do them. And so I really had to learn quickly how to stop being strategic and how to focus on execution. And one of the best lessons that helped me see that when we were launching the first city that I was in, which was Frankfurt, I was in the office and, I had a CFA designation and I worked in private equity. I thought I was this big hotshot. And they said, okay, we need to start like finding drivers and we need to get like thousands of phones and devices to distribute to these drivers. And so I said, okay, I'll put together a strategy to like do a paid channel acquisition of drivers, that we can test, and I'll find an agency to help. And, I'm going to do a financial model so we can project what the math might look like. And I'll see if I can find like a supplier of the things that we want. And my manager just looked at me and said, what are you talking about? Just go to the airport right now. There's thousands of drivers there. Print out these brochures and don't come back until you have 10. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, what do you mean? We need drivers now. Just go talk to them. Just literally you personally go close 10 drivers. And by the way, the mall down the street has all the stuff we need. Just take this credit card and go buy it. You don't have time to waste trying to find a vendor to do this. And so it was immediately clear to me that Uber and early stage success demands execution. And that was a major takeaway. The second, I think, is resilience. I think that resilience is one of, if not the most important qualities to have in a startup. What most people don't understand about startups is how hard it is actually get through them. When you're at a startup, every week, you're going to have more work than you've probably ever had in your life. You are going to encounter obstacles at every turn. There is no IT department. There is no HR department. There are no processes. There is no documentation. And everyone in the company is busy and has other things to do. And so you have to learn very, very quickly to be resourceful and to be resilient. And I had times during my time in Eastern Europe where I went through the worst things I'd ever gone through in my life. I had to shut down an entire office because we got our business shut down. I had to let all the people go that I had hired. I had to contend with, and we had to contend with very, very, very difficult regulatory and in some cases criminal organizations that were trying to stop us from launching. The obstacles are everywhere. And my experience has been the vast majority of people just simply are not mentally tough enough to do it. And I think this is the last point I'll share, which relates back to this. That is why it's so important to genuinely be passionate about what you're doing. If you join a startup and you don't really believe in the mission, you don't really want to be there, you're going to quit within 6 months. Startups are really good at seeing who really wants to be there or not, because you are going to work and work and work, and you are going to have to overcome obstacles, and you are not going to have any of the surety and blankets and padding of a large corporate environment. There's no 9 to 5. There's no Monday to Friday. That's it. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's your focus. If you're a launcher in Eastern Europe, you don't even know anyone there. And so the thing that really helped me was I struggled a lot with those things, and they were very difficult, but I was really passionate and believed in the mission, and I really wanted Uber to be successful, and I believed that the work I was doing was impactful. So I chose to do those things voluntarily. I chose to work late. I chose to deal with stress. I chose to be in the deep end and to constantly be doing things I've never done before and fail and fail and fail until I learned how to do them. My experience is most people who aren't genuinely passionate will just give up, because any rational person that isn't really passionate would just say, I can make a salary and go home earlier and not have to put up with this stress. Those are the 3 things that I took away.
Okay. So lots of things to unpack here, and thank you for also summarizing them as just key points, because they're easy takeaways. So I'll repeat them for all our audience. I think the first one was the relentless bias for execution. The second one, just this resilience. And the third one, passion, which I think are great takeaways for everyone. And as I was hearing you, I think that you've managed to imprint all of these things probably in Float's culture. But I also think that's a hard thing to manage because when startups start growing, like I was saying at the beginning, Float has been growing a lot rapidly. This probably starts getting harder to imprint in the culture, right? So how do you manage to maintain all of this top 3 factors, let's say that you were mentioning, into the employees that you have at Float? How do you manage to like determine whether they're passionate or not? And basically, what things are you looking for when you're hiring people to work at Float?
Yeah, one of the best lessons I learned from my time at Uber was incredibly committed to culture. Culture was talked about on every single all hands. They were maniacal about clearly articulating who we are, what our cultural values are, and what we expect from the people who work here. And people who don't meet these standards, we don't want to recruit. We don't care how much experience they have. We don't care how great they are. If they are not customer obsessed, if they are not biased for action, if they are not truth seekers, if they can't handle principled confrontation for the betterment of the business and the mission, they can't be here. And so everything starts with recruiting. And when we started Float, we wrote our cultural values. We have 7. And we established them because we believed they reflected our own values and also what we believed needed to be true for us to be successful as a company. If we don't have these qualities, we just won't win. And so we drafted them and we codified them into our recruitment process. And so we interview thousands of people a year at Float, if not more. I personally interview almost every single person that comes to the company at a manager level and above. And we are very uncompromising. So we take the time to really get to know candidates. It's a thorough interview process. We interview them for smarts and for their ability to think on their feet and solve business problems. But we actively test for how they fulfill or don't cultural values that we have here. And when we make hiring decisions, we do not hire people. We don't just let hiring managers make a decision. So we have a panel. And we have a hiring manager. So that's the leader recruiting for that role. And then we have 3 other people on the panel. And that panel has to come to a strong yes decision. We call it fuck yes. It's fuck yes. Or anything that's not a fuck yes is a no. And one of the things that we talk about, we go around in a circle and the interviewers have divided up what they're testing for. And we talk about, we think this person's really smart, but what we didn't feel was they're not genuinely customer obsessed. They're pitching us on all these ways that we can make money and introduce fees, but they never mentioned the customer. And so we really look at those things carefully when we recruit. And then within the company, we obviously recognize people who live our cultural values. And we also move people out who don't. So some people that don't survive or don't last at Float and maybe choose to move on, or we choose to move on, we share actively with them, hey, here are areas where from a cultural perspective, we don't see you driving towards the mission and the vision of the company. And we're willing to make hard decisions around it. So I think you have to walk the talk. You can't just paint the walls with your cultural values. Every single person, starting with the CEO of the company, has to live them and has to be held accountable to them, or else they're just platitudes on a wall.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. How you're explaining all of this hiring process demonstrates how you're living out the culture and imprinting it in everyone, which is very inspiring. And I want to ask you, besides from culture, which I believe is probably one of the most important factors for...
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
Float success. What other things do you think have contributed to lead the company where it is now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, look, I'll start by saying you need some luck. Everyone that listens to startup stories, it's really important to remember startups are really finicky. You could have a great idea and launch it 2 years early, 2 years late. Sometimes momentum just happens. And I think Float had a lot of luck. And I think any startup that doesn't attribute some of what they're doing to luck is probably a little bit arrogant. The second is we had product market fit. And in the end, startups simply do not go anywhere unless one thing is true. And that is that there are customers that love the product. If you don't have that, nothing else matters. You shouldn't be hiring. You shouldn't be doing sales. You shouldn't be doing anything. You should just be ensuring that there are 20, 30, 40, 50 people out there who think your product is God's gift to earth. And it's not good enough to be a little bit better. There's a saying in the industry, a new solution has to be 10 times better, cheaper, or faster than the incumbent solutions for people to even consider using them. And so you have to have product market fit. And I think the last one is talent density. The concept of talent density, it's an actual concept in startup and company building, which is this idea of for the first 100 people that we hire, we are going to hold the highest standards possible. We are going to recruit so much high quality talent in our first 30, 40, 50 employees that one, the capabilities of those 50 people are going to be the capabilities of 250 average people. And those people are going to set the tone for what success looks like. And they're going to recruit people in their networks. And people that are really good are going to look at them and see them in our company and go, whoa, these are really great people. I want to work with those people. And I think that talent density is really hard to cultivate. It's very difficult. You do have to say no a lot in the early days, and it makes your life harder, but it has a compounding effect. And I think that the challenge for leaders and founders is you have to do this from the beginning, because if you hire 20, 30, 40 people and you screw it up, pretty hard to recover from that. Your first 10, 20, 30 employees are probably some of the most important decisions that you make as a leader. And so we've really focused on recruiting the best, upholding an extremely high bar, and consistently challenging ourselves to be better every single month.
Great. That's awesome. And I know you already spoke a little bit about the recruiting process. I want to go back into the second point you were mentioning, the product market fit. Yeah. Because I think this is crucial. Like, this is something that we learn in all of the MBA classes conceptually, but then again, finding it's way harder. So I want to ask you, how can you know when you already found product market fit? Do you start interviewing customers and then building something based on this interviews, or you're taking them MVPs and testing them? How was your case with Float?
Yeah, I mean, my co-founders, they had started before I got involved. And so they actually had an MVP. And so what we did and they had done was they had a hypothesis about a couple of product ideas that they thought were worthwhile. And they're very smart. So instead of spending, 2 years researching them, they just spent 2 months building them and actually bringing them to customers. And so they went to, we went to 10 or 20 companies that we knew, we knew the founders, we got introduced, and we said, we have a hypothesis that this is a really great product. We'd love to know what you think. And we get feedback on the product. And we'd say, don't sugarcoat it. Do you actually want this or not? Don't tell us it's kind of cool. If you don't think it's cool, tell us it sucks. We actually need to know. And we interviewed them and we'd see how they'd use the product, and we'd ask them questions. And we'd ask them, what other problems do you have? And product market fit's not a perfect thing to define, but when you see it, you know it. And for most startups, your first 100 customers, they're not coming through sales. They're not coming through paid marketing. I see people make this mistake all the time coming from MBA programs. They think like there's going to be some paid marketing program. Are you kidding me? Your first 100 customers, you better go find yourself. You better personally know them. You better personally onboard them, because that is the most important signal you're going to get as a founder. You cannot get paid marketing people to do that for you. No one's signing up for your products or paid marketing. So you have to go direct. And I think that we got really good feedback. So we had a qualitative sense that we were onto something. And then when we launched the product in April of 2021, formally, we saw huge demand. We saw organic signups going up every month. We saw referrals, and we saw a lot of word of mouth. And I think that if you don't have those things, you probably don't have product market fit, and you definitely cannot strategize around that. You just literally need to narrow in on a better product, try to cultivate a better value proposition, and convince 10 customers that you believe represent a potential buyer that they should try it and get real feedback. You can't make it up. You can't fake your way through it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. And now I want to move this part of the podcast into talking a little bit more about just the fintech industry as a whole, because we have discussed in our classes that there are 4 elements that every fintech company should consider. So trust would be the first one, because people are putting money into your company. So of course they need to trust it. Second one is reputation, which is hard to build for startups. The third one is risk management, because fraud is an awful cost source for all the fintech companies. And the fourth one is compliance. And I would think that Float has made a great job with all of them, but I wanted to know which of this one was the hardest to get for Float, and why was this?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I completely agree. I will say those things won't create a company for you. So you can have a great well, I don't think you can have a reputation yet, but risk management and compliance aren't going to get you customers. They're not going to build you a great product. So before you have any of those things, you do have to have a great product. Mm-hmm. And that is the basis for the existence of any company in the end. But it's so true. And I think early on, we recognized this is not just a software business. This is a financial services business. We will have thousands of transactions, confidential transactions from our customers. We will be privy to financial information in some cases, or at least our platform will, from those transactions. We have accounting connections with our customers, and we do have to collect certain information in order to comply with regulations in Canada. All of those things, they are essential, especially in Canada and especially in fintech, where trust matters. And people aren't going to use a product, even if it looks great, if they don't trust you, if you're touching their money, if you're touching their bank accounts, if you're touching their financial information. And so we prioritized it from the beginning. One is we resourced it. So from the very beginning, we hired people in risk management. We've always had a compliance team. It's a sizable team at Float, and we're very proud of that. And we also have people in fraud. So I think those things really help on the compliance front, on the fraud front. Trust is earned, though, and reputation is earned. And so I think we built trust over time by being persistent, by showing our customers and companies that we want to work with how we satisfy these obligations and what our approach and attitude is to these topics, and to course correcting and fixing things when they inevitably break. And, there are times when we'll make a mistake and we'll send a bunch of customers an erroneous email, or customers will try to load money into Float and it'll get delayed. And as a startup, you're going to make some of those mistakes. My view is you own them from the beginning. You communicate with your customers and you take accountability. We're sorry this happened. Here's what happened. Here's what we're doing about it. Here's why it won't happen again. And I remember one of our earliest customers 6 months ago, we had an event here, and I said, you've been with Float for a long time. What is it? Like, why did you stick with us? Because the product always hasn't been perfect. If you join from the beginning, startups are not perfect. And she said, I knew when I started with Float, your product wasn't perfect. I could tell you guys had some Band-Aids and some duct tape. But what I believed is that every single month you got better, you listened to my feedback, and you showed genuine care for your customers. And so you built an immense amount of trust. And that allowed us, and I think this is really important, to overcome the mistakes that startups make. You launch products that don't work. You send emails that weren't meant to be sent. Certain products break, and on a Saturday, the whole company's got to come in and fix it and email, a bunch of customers and apologize. Those things do happen, but I think it really, really helps when people trust you because you've done the right thing all along and you own up those mistakes when you make them.
Okay. Thank you very much. And just for wrapping things up, I had some questions of upcoming trends or things that we might see in the future of fintech. So I wanted to ask specifically, which problems do you still see in this industry that need to be addressed?
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for a light and fit remix. Like a crunchy storm of graham cookies, caramel pearls, and dark chocolate, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 light and fit remix varieties with craveable flavors and up to 120 calories and 10 grams of protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See remixyogurt.com.
Addressed for maybe other students to consider some of these ideas to find their solutions in the future?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think that in risk management, compliance, and fraud, I think there are many exciting opportunities. The tooling to tackle these problems and to leverage not just great automated workflows, but also artificial intelligence to spot patterns in advance and be much more proactive, I think is a really exciting space. All companies like Float and Wealthsimple and Neo and Borrowell, they need these tools. They have to use these tools and they need better tools. And so I think that that's one area of opportunity. I think the second is like transaction ledgering and reconciliation. Our payment rails in Canada are incredibly outdated. And so the metadata that is transacted with a wire payment or a bill payment or a credit card payment is not particularly helpful for a company that at the end of the month ultimately needs to say, what was that transaction for? Which department should it be tied to? What type of expense is it? And this results in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of man hours of wasted productivity in Canada because finance teams sit around and do this. And so we're constantly looking at who are the players out there that can help us enrich the transaction data that we have so that we can provide more robust insights to our customers and create more automated experiences. And I think the last one is probably in the area of credit. Credit is still, I think, in its nascency in the fintech industry. Companies do offer credit, but I think the tools and the approaches that companies are taking to underwrite companies can be a lot more modern, meaning how do we underwrite a company in a minute? Not because we just chose to give them credit, because that wouldn't be great risk management, but because we have superior access to information. We don't need them to submit financial statements to us. They can just connect their accounting software. They can just connect their bank accounts. They can click a button. Our system can ingest this information and produce an outcome for them in a minute. And I think that continues to be a major opportunity that I think remains unsolved.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rob. And thank you for joining us. It was great hearing and learning all of the stories from you. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks a lot.